Good afternoon. Today's jobs report shows the extraordinary impact recent weather events have had on our economy. Calculations from Moody's Analytics estimate the recent storms could cause between $195 billion and $245 billion in economic losses. But those numbers, as large as they are not the best way to understand the impact these storms have had on the people of our nation. President Trump has now personally visited storm-ravaged areas in numerous states and territories. He's seen the devastation, and he's looked into the eyes of Americans struggling to find hope in the midst of heartache. The President has committed to these people that we will walk with them every step of the way as they rebuild their homes, their communities, and their lives. And he has committed to all Americans that we are going to build an economy that works for everyone. We are encouraged to see that the unemployment rate has once again dropped and workforce participation vaulted to a 3.5-year high. This report underscores the need for Congress to work with us to grow the economy and create jobs. The importance of passing tax relief for American workers and business cannot be overstated. We have a once-in-a-generation opportunity to create a tax code that is simple, fair, and easy to understand. That means getting rid of the loopholes that primarily benefit the wealthiest Americans and special interests. It also means lowering taxes for middle-income Americans so that they can keep more of their hard-earned paychecks and buy the great American products made by American manufacturers. Today, the President signed a proclamation declaring October 6th National Manufacturing Day. This honors the men and women who create the products that power our communities, improve our lives, and defend our nation. The people who, as the President says, believe in those beautiful words, made in the USA. In addition to the 14 workers the President hosted in the Oval Office during today's proclamation signing, more than 500,000 people around the country are participating in thousands of events related to Manufacturing Day. Among them will be numerous members of the President's cabinet and other senior officials. Our tax plan would lead to a great American manufacturing boom. We will cut taxes on American manufacturers and businesses of all sizes and restore their competitive edge so they can create more jobs and higher wages for our workers. Our plan will also encourage them to bring back trillions of dollars currently parked overseas. The President will be back out on the road next week building support for this plan, which is really a jobs bill. He will be visiting Hamburg, Pennsylvania on Wednesday, and we'll have more details on that trip coming soon. And with that, we'll kick off Friday with questions, and we'll start now. This is kind of fun. We should do this more often, not just save it for Fridays. John Decker.
Thank you, Sarah. The body of another U.S. soldier has just been discovered by local forces in Niger, which brings to 4 the total number of Green Berets that were killed on Wednesday in Niger. So far, there's been no response to this by the President. No tweet from the President, no statement from the President. Can we expect some sort of reprisal by the U.S. military in Niger as it relates to what happened on Wednesday?
I made a statement on behalf of the administration yesterday in the opening. Obviously, any time one of the members of our great military are injured, wounded, or killed in action, that is certainly something that we take very seriously. Our thoughts and prayers are with those individuals. We're continuing to review and look into this, and as we have more details, we'll certainly let you guys know. Cecilia.
Thanks, Sarah. Can you clarify the President's comments? Was he referring to military action when he said calm before the storm?
As we've said many times before, I know the President has, as I have from this podium on quite a few occasions. We're never going to say in advance what the President's going to do. And as he said last night, in addition to those comments, you'll have to wait and see.
But how seriously should the American public or American adversaries, for that matter, take these comments? Was it a joke? Was it serious?
I think you can take the President protecting the American people always extremely serious. He's been very clear that that's his #1 priority, and if he feels that action is necessary, he'll take it. Steve?
Sarah, when the President said that he wants his military leaders to give him military options faster, does he feel like they are intentionally slow-walking these options to him?
No, not at all. But this is, as you know, he's a person who likes to take action and take it quickly. And I don't think you should read into anything beyond that, as he wants options on the table so that he can make quick decisions.
Was that just a general comment, or did he mean a specific country?
I believe that was just a general comment. I'm not aware of anything specific that was in reference to.
Sarah, I have two questions. One on the soldier who was killed in Niger, and the other on DACA. On the soldier, when was the president made aware that there was a fourth soldier that was missing in action, and when did he become aware that, unfortunately, that soldier had been killed and discovered by local forces?
I believe that the notification was yesterday, but I'd have to get clarification on the specific timing of when that took place.
And when was the president made aware that that soldier's body was found?
I know that it was pretty soon after that had been discovered, but as far as like an exact time, I couldn't give you that. But I know Chief Kelly kept him updated constantly on that situation as it evolved.
And for the question on DACA, today the president welcomed Hispanic American leaders to the White House. He did not mention his decision to end DACA during his remarks there. He did not renew his call for Congress to protect those who are going to be vulnerable for deportation starting in March. Why did he not bring that up?
Look, I think he's been clear. There's no reason to continue to reiterate the same position that he's held. He's called on Congress to act on it. You can expect in the coming days that he'll lay out his responsible immigration reform. I think you can count on that to happen very soon. And that's all part of the process moving forward. But he hasn't been unclear about what his position is on that front. April.
Sarah, going back to calm before the storm. When presidents deal with world matters like this, all options are on the table. Has this White House exhausted diplomacy? Because for him to say the calm before the storm, and listening to what you just had to say.
We're continuing to put maximum economic and diplomatic pressure on countries like North Korea. We're going to continue to do that, but at the same time, the president's going to keep all of his options on the table. Our position has not changed. It's been very consistent.
North Korea, that's the storm.
I'm just using that as an example. I think we've got a lot of bad actors in the world, North Korea, Iran. There's several examples there. Blake?
Sarah, let me ask you about the HHS decision today to expand the contraception waiver. The ACLU has already filed a lawsuit, or at least announced its intention to, and this was their response. They said, and I quote, "The Trump administration is forcing women to pay for their boss's religious beliefs." They go on to say, "We're filing this lawsuit because the federal government cannot authorize discrimination against women in the name of religion or otherwise." Your response to that would be what?
I don't think it's been a secret that I would probably never use the ACLU to get any of my talking points. The president believes that the freedom to practice one's faith is a fundamental right in this country, and I think all of us do. And that's all that today was about. Our federal government should always protect that right, and as long as Donald Trump is president, he will.
So then, in not responding to the ACLU, what would you say maybe to the women out there, or to the families out there who now have to pay more out of their pocket to get contraception coverage that they choose and that they desire?
This is a president who supports the First Amendment, supports the freedom of religion. I don't understand why that should be an issue. The Supreme Court has validated this decision, certainly many times over, and the president is somebody who believes in the Constitution. If people don't like what the Constitution says, they should talk to Congress about changing it. Hallie.
I want to follow up on that. I've got another for you. Given the lawsuits that the ACLU has already filed, said it would plan to file, is the administration prepared to defend this contraceptive mandate rollback all the way to the Supreme Court if need be?
The Supreme Court's already made clear what their position is, and it supports what this administration has done.
There will be a legal fight that escalates to the Supreme Court.
I think if it does, it'll show that this administration is on the right side of the law.
And then my question, Sarah, was just on the calm before the storm issue again, because if the president wants to preserve.
Why wouldn't we ask the same question?
Well, it's a different question.
It is Friday, so I thought maybe we'd change it
It's
up.
actually a follow-up, because if you said the president wants to preserve an element of surprise. So if he wants to preserve an element of surprise, why would he dangle hints about his actions in the first place?
I don't believe he did. Matthew.
You'll find out and brought up upon before the storm. So he unprompted.
He didn't talk about any specific actions at all. Matthew.
If I could ask two questions. First, following up on the HHS change, does the White House have any estimate of how many people could lose access to birth control under this change?
I'm not aware. I'd refer you to HHS for specifics on that data.
Just a quick follow-up on a different topic. The President repeated earlier today that the U.S. is the highest taxed nation in the world. That's not true. So why does he keep making that statement? Why does he stick to that talking point?
I believe there are specific sectors within the country that are among the highest taxed in the world, and we'll be happy to provide. We'll be happy to provide that data to you, John.
Thank you, Sarah. I have two questions. First, there's been rumors that Prime Minister Tsipras of Greece will come here on the 17th, meet with the President, and then meet with the Vice President on the 18th, and we've had no confirmation. Is the Prime Minister invited, and is he coming to meet the President and Vice President?
He is, and I believe that date is correct. The 17th, I believe that he'll be here on that date.
The other thing is that the administration has had a vacancy without a permanent Secretary of Homeland Security for 2 months, which is a record for that position not operating with a permanent secretary. Are we going to have an announcement on a choice of a permanent secretary within days, next week perhaps? And rumors are consistent, he will make Elaine Duke the permanent secretary and send her appointment up. True or false?
I'm not going to get ahead of any announcement that the President may make about a permanent person, but I will say that Acting Secretary Duke is very competent and has managed the Department of Homeland Security very well in a very tough and trying time given the hurricane season that we've had, and certainly have not wanted to make big shifts in leadership during this time, and while there's so much going on there. In terms of a timetable, we'll keep you posted when we have an announcement on that front.
Opinion too, right?
I'm sorry?
That's what you just said about Secretary Duke. The testimony you gave is the President's opinion of her as well.
Yes, he's happy with the job that she's done as the acting secretary. Jordan?
Thanks, Sarah. Senator Cornyn said that the immigration principles that are being floated out there would be harmful to the DACA negotiations. He believes that DACA should be kept separate from any discussion about legal immigration. What is the White House response to that? I mean, are you guys committed to attaching legal immigration to the DACA debate?
We want to make sure that whatever we put forward is a responsible immigration reform. That's not one piece of this process dealt with separately. We need to make sure that we're addressing all the problems so that we're not dealing with this again in 2, 4, 5, 6 years, but that we're putting forward a very thorough and full plan. And that's what you're going to see coming from the administration in very short order. Fred?
Oh, thanks, sir. Two questions. First, does the White House have the view on the CFPB rule on payday lending?
Not that I'm aware of. I'd have to check on that and circle back with you, Fred.
And just to follow up on that topic, there have been some House Republicans who believe that there's already cause for firing Richard Cordray, going back to his handling of the Wells Fargo case. Why hasn't the president taken action? I mean, does he approve of the job that Cordray has done so far?
When we have any personnel announcements on that front, we'll certainly keep you guys posted. That's 2 already. I'm going to have to move on. Margaret, sorry.
Two quick questions for you. One, there have been some rumors about the future of Secretary of State Rex Tillerson today. Can you continue to say the President remains confident in him as Secretary of State?
He does. As he said yesterday, or 2 days ago, as I said yesterday, nothing has changed despite what you may read in the media or watch on TV. I would certainly trust the President in my comments far above those of other reporters.
And I want to ask you, the President, words matter. The President can move markets. He can cause miscalculation when it comes to adversaries. In the context of the questions asked of you today, when you've been asked of what he meant by calm before the storm, you've mentioned North Korea, you've mentioned Iran. There's the implication that there is some kind of military action. There was some sort of forecasting there. Can you clarify if we are interpreting things correctly?
I haven't been specific about anything. I've also talked about the fact that we're continuing to put maximum economic and diplomatic pressure on countries like North Korea. I'm simply saying that all options are on the table as they have been, and we're not going to announce what actions we'll be taking until that moment comes.
Why did he say that?
Sarah, can you be more specific about the President's position on bump stocks? Would he be open to legislation clearly banning them?
As I said yesterday, we want to be part of that conversation. We want to gather more information. We're going to continue to do that over the coming days, and that's the current position. It hasn't changed since yesterday.
Thank you, Sarah. 2 questions, if I can.
Why not?
I asked you about Senator Corker a few
Just
weeks
not
back.
3. 2's the limit.
Just 2. I asked you about Senator Corker and some of the comments he made a few weeks back. Earlier this week, he said that Secretary Tillerson, Secretary Mattis, and General Kelly are basically what's keeping the country separated from chaos, and he said that there are other people in the White House that aren't, putting forth policies in a coherent fashion. Do you have any response to Senator Corker's statement?
Look, I think that the president is the one that's keeping the world from chaos. He has an incredible team around him that's helping him lead that effort, and he's had tremendous accomplishments on the international stage by working with allies and confronting enemies. We're going to continue doing that. We're going to continue doing that as a team with the president leading that effort.
Is General Kelly helping to lead that effort? Is General Kelly?
I'll come back to you. We have
Sarah,
time.
Getting back to these calm before the storm comments, I wanted to ask you about that in a different way. There's a theory in Washington, and forgive me if you've been asked about it before, that the president subscribes to this madman theory, that if he makes a lot of unsettling, off-putting comments that sort of throw people off, that he likes to keep his adversaries guessing. That's sort of the point of making comments like calm before the storm and so forth. What is your sense of that? Is there anything to that?
I think the president's addressed this himself. He certainly doesn't want to lay out his game plan for our enemies. So if you're asking, is the president trying to, do that? Absolutely. I mean, I don't think that's a secret. I wouldn't say necessarily that he's trying to throw people off, but he's not trying to broadcast or telegraph his exact actions. I think we've seen what a failure it is when an administration does that, and this is a president who's going to do it differently and do it better.
Just a quick follow-up on that. So when people when they sort of catch their breath in this town, when they sort of hold their breath in this town, when he says something like that, you have a smile on your face. I mean, is that somewhat satisfying?
No, I just picture people in this town actually holding their breath. That might be a welcome surprise for most of America. Go ahead.
Sarah, just one more thing I want to pick up on what Margaret was trying to get at, I think, is let me put it to you this way. Can you exclude the possibility that the president was actually just being mischievous? That he was messing with the press a little bit when he made that comment?
I wouldn't say that he's messing with the press. I think we have some serious world issues here. I think that North Korea, Iran, both continue to be bad actors, and the president is somebody who's going to always look for ways to protect Americans, and he's not going to dictate what those actions may look like. I don't think there's anything beyond that that I can add on that front.
A question on Iran. A couple days ago, Senator Tom Cotton gave a speech in which he said he believes the best outcome for the Iranian nuclear deal would have it to be referred to Congress, but rather than have Congress reimpose sanctions, which he called a backward-looking step, we would use this period of 120, 90 days to renegotiate several terms of the deal. Does the White House think that sounds like a plausible, like a good way to deal with the Iran nuclear deal?
I'm not going to get ahead of the president's announcement on the decision that he has. What I can tell you is the president isn't looking at one piece of this. He's looking at all of the bad behavior of Iran, not just the nuclear deal as bad behavior, but the ballistic missile testing, destabilizing of the region, #1 state sponsor of terrorism, cyber attacks, illicit nuclear program. He wants to look for a broad strategy that addresses all of those problems, not just one-offing those. That's what his team is focused on, and that's what he'll be rolling out to address that as a whole in the coming days. Steve?
Follow up on that. Is it the president's wish that Congress reimpose sanctions on Iran for those bad acts you're talking
Again,
about?
I'm not going to get into the details of what the president's decision is until he makes that later in the week.
Another question about
April.
Cuba, Sarah. Sarah, about Cuba. Our CBS News reporting today has taken the story to a new level. There are now Americans who do not work for the government who are saying that they're subject to these tough attacks. The State Department is telling us that there are a handful of Americans who have reported these symptoms. What's going on here? How is the White House viewing this? How are we going to get to the bottom?
Something we take extremely seriously. We're continuing to investigate. The State Department is taking the lead on this effort, and we're going to continue looking into this until we get some real answers. Brian? I'll come back.
Just to drill down a little bit on what you said yesterday about the press, saying that we owe it. I don't think anybody disagree that we should be as accurate, fact-finding as possible. But to flip it, do you and the president believe the president has a responsibility to be as truthful and honest with us as possible? Has he done it? And for those surrogates who have used your terms, alternative facts, would they then not do that?
Absolutely. I think we all come here every day and do our very best to give you the best and most accurate information that we possibly can. April? I think so.
Okay,
April.
going back to the answer about leadership, the president's leading, is General Kelly part of that leadership team with the president as he's leading in this White House?
Absolutely.
Does the president have confidence in General Kelly?
Absolutely.
And if today is Friday, could we expect a resignation today from anyone?
I don't think so, April. David?
Thank you, Sarah. Since we last heard from you, the film producer Harvey Weinstein has become the subject of some very serious sexual harassment allegations. And there's building pressure among Democrats who receive campaign donations from him to send the money back. And I note that this particular producer was very critical of the president during the campaign and suggested that Latinos in Hollywood would be deported if he were elected. Does the president support the idea that Democrats who got donations from this person should send the money back?
I think it's a decision for those individuals to make. Whether or not that's money that they want to take, that's up to them. That's certainly not a decision for us to make.
And one more, I'm sorry. Why hasn't the president fired John Koskinen from the IRS, given all the scandal over the conservative targeting scandal that he commented about so much during the campaign? Why does John Koskinen still have his job?
I'll have to ask him, David, and get back to you. Deb?
Las Vegas question. The president lavished praise on the Las Vegas police for their amazing handling and their response after the Sunday mass shooting. Nevadans credit federal programs that train aides to deal with terrorist attacks.
I'm sorry, can you speak up a little bit?
Nevadans credit federal money programs that train them to deal with terrorist attacks for their great response. You all have cuts in those programs in your budget plan. Are you rethinking that?
I think at this point we're continuing to move forward. If there is a moment where we feel like the safety and security of American citizens may be at risk because of cuts, I think we'd have to revisit it at that time. Jim?
Sarah, the nation lost 33,000 jobs in September, and I was just curious how the president feels about that, and is he stepping up his efforts to convince Congress to pass major tax reform because of this surprising job loss in September?
I think that today's report shows certainly the devastating impact of the hurricane season. But while many displaced weren't able to work, the economy still remains extremely strong. Those people continue to have jobs, which is why the unemployment rate actually fell. I think one thing to really note, and something that this administration wants to focus on, certainly moving into the future, I think tax reform plays a big role in this, but that one of the big identifiers that I think we should look at is the drop in the unemployment rate, including new lows for African Americans, teens, and women, which is certainly a great step forward in this process.
Sarah, a question about the Affordable Care Act. President Trump has repeatedly said that we should just let Obamacare implode. But there's a new report in the Washington Post that says that President Trump personally directed administration officials to deny a request from the Republican governor of Iowa to fix the Obamacare market in that state. Is that true?
I'm not aware of that specific directive, so I'd have to check into that and get back to you.
If it is true,
I'm not going to comment on hypotheticals where I don't have the information in front of me.
Thanks, sir. I wanted to ask you a question about the Iran recertification process. Regardless of what the president decides, when he makes this decision next week, would you rather not have to do this every 90 days after that?
Again, as I said earlier, we're looking at something that is a broad strategy, doesn't just address one part of Iran's bad behavior, but that addresses a wide range of issues. So that would certainly be our focus. Hopefully, they would begin to not be a bad actor and we wouldn't have to do this at all. But our goal, again, would be to address a number of factors, not just one or two things. Peter?
Second question.
It is
in the 6
two-question
weeks
Brad.
since the president indicated that he wanted Pakistan to move against, what did you say, agents of chaos within Pakistani territory or areas under Pakistani control. The foreign minister was here in the White House this week to meet General McMaster. Have you really seen any change in Pakistani behavior in those 6 weeks?
Nothing specific that I can weigh into at this time, but we'll certainly keep you posted. Peter?
Sarah, will the president campaign for the candidate for governor in Virginia, Ed Gillespie?
As I've said many times before from the podium, I'm not going to weigh into specific races and the actions that we may or may not take. And I think that's a great place to end us for Friday. And I hope everybody has a great rest of your Friday and a good weekend. Thanks,
Sarah,
guys.
you're going to vote Ed Gillespie, so my question was, why is it appropriate for him to? I'll wait if you want to take some time.
Hey there, welcome to this Friday edition of the Briefing Room. I'm Arlette Saenz, joined here by my colleagues Megan Hughes and Justin Fischel, who cover the White House and Capitol Hill and all things across Washington. We'll be joined by some other guests in a little bit to discuss the latest headlines, both out of the briefing and across Washington today. And we want to start with some comments that the president made yesterday during a meeting with military leaders, where he talked about how this may be the calm before the storm. We have some video of that we're going to play from you from last night.
Do you guys know what this represents?
Tell us, sir.
I don't know, maybe it's the calm before the storm.
What's the storm?
Could be the calm before the storm.
What storm, Mr. President?
You'll find out.
So a bit of a cryptic comment from the president there, and our own Cecilia Vega a little while ago was in the Oval Office, and she tried to get a little bit more clarity from him on that topic.
Yeah, this is just, all right, so she asked him about it, and he winked at her and then said the same thing. You'll find out what this is all about. We've been covering Trump for a while. We who cover him closely kind of think this is just meaningless bluster. I doubt there's anything behind the curtain. Do you guys agree?
So Sanders was asked about this 5 times. I mean, it was, everyone wants to know, what does this mean? Should we? And I will say that Sanders repeatedly jumped to talking about how the president really prioritizes protecting the American people. She at one point immediately shifted to talking about North Korea, which of course, your mind immediately goes to tweets over the weekend, where the president is saying, "Save your energy, Rex. We'll do what has to be done."
It's
the
just
talk
sort
of fire and fury.
And if he does mean something, it's totally reckless and nonsensical. And I worked at the Pentagon, covered the Pentagon for 7 years. I can guarantee you, nobody in that room, that top military brass surrounding him, they support him, but they don't appreciate stuff like that. This is not their style. So that couldn't have gone over well with them, whatever he meant.
And I want to turn to our colleague over at the White House, Jordan Phelps. Jordan, you see the president almost on a daily basis. What did you make of those comments? Is he actually talking about something specific here?
No, definitely not. I have to agree with Justin 100%. The president here is just using a little bluster. This is classic Trump being Trump. We know that the president likes to project strength and this image of being tough, and that we know that that's more the image, and that behind that there are methods the administration is using to, use diplomacy. Like Megan referenced these tweets we saw over the weekend from the president, basically batting down what Rex Tillerson had said, that the U.S. has direct lines to North Korea. So even though the United States may be taking those diplomatic approaches, the president doesn't want the enemies of the United States to know that. He wants them to be afraid. He wants them to fear the United States. And that's really what you see the president doing here. But again, I think that the setting for that in a room with military leaders and their spouses, those spouses who deal with the effects of what it means for the military to go to war, it's safe to say that some in that room didn't appreciate those comments very much.
And I think people will be watching closely to see if there's any tweets over the weekend kind of maybe relating to this. And also we want to turn to something else that's making news today here in D.C., the fact that the White House is rolling back the Obamacare birth control mandate, now saying that many employers can opt out of offering birth control at no cost to their employees.
Megan,
you were really drilling down to this.
Yes,
Please,
yes, I will. So, two rules coming out of this is coming out of HHS. So one is companies, entities, organizations can say we opt out because we don't agree with this on religious grounds, and then the second part is maybe a pro-life organization, for example, that's not necessarily religious, but saying on moral grounds, we're going to opt out of...
But it doesn't mean any company, right? Like the big publicly traded companies, it's not going to be so easy.
It becomes tricky for a publicly traded company because you've got a lot of shareholders, right. and how do you say yes, you've got a lot of voices. So there's going to be a public comment period where they're going to be taking a look at publicly traded companies as well. But, in general, big picture, this really loosens things up for employers to try to get out of that requirement that they cover contraception.
And we've already seen a lot of reaction pouring in from various groups like the ACLU and also members of Congress up on Capitol Hill. And I wanted to turn to our colleague Ben Siegel, who's over in the Senate booth right now. You actually got a statement from House Speaker Paul Ryan saying that this was a win for religious liberty. What are you hearing from people up there?
Yeah, this is a big day for Republicans. Paul Ryan said this was a landmark day for religious liberty in his statement. But I can promise you that from every Republican, from President Trump to every member up here, this is not the biggest health care win they wanted this year. They really wanted to repeal and replace Obamacare. That still has proven to be elusive. This is a victory for them in religious freedom. It's certainly not the last we'll hear about this. Democrats and activist groups are filing lawsuits, raising money over this. So this is a big day in terms of religious liberty and that fight that they've been waging. But there's also this larger fight to repeal Obamacare that is still ongoing. And if I can just add to what you guys were saying about these cryptic comments from the president, Sarah Sanders there in the briefing, it really felt like her covfefe moment, if that makes any sense. That cryptic tweet that President Trump had in the earlier on that didn't make any sense. Sean Spicer, the former press secretary, came out to explain it. He said the president and a small group of people knew what that meant. Nobody really understood that. I don't think anybody really understood what she was saying today. And it just gets in the way of, selling the administration's message. This is her time every day to go out there and tell the American people, what the president is working on. This is how your life is going to get better. And instead she's spending 10 minutes explaining a comment and a wink that the president made, and not doing it very successfully if you're reading the faces in the room there.
Yeah, and she was asked about whether or not the president is playing the role of madman, and she kind of said yes, maybe.
Right, exactly.
Just that there's some strategy that we. It didn't seem like she knew.
Yeah, that was an interesting way to respond to those things. And we want to go ahead and keep moving and turn on to something else that not a lot of Washington was talking about last week, but now they're talking about it now, the bump stocks. I think Justin probably knows the best way to explain this.
Oh, well, that's true. I hadn't heard anything about it either before.
But you're an expert now.
I've studied up. I've talked to my friends who shoot a lot of guns, and what they tell me, for those who don't know, the bump stock is a legal attachment that they sell that you can put on your gun to make a semi-automatic rifle turn basically into an automatic rifle. And this is kind of interesting the way it works. The thing harnesses the recoil that a gun will cause, and then uses that recoil to keep bumping the trigger repeatedly. So then you're firing automatically, essentially. As you said, nobody in Congress had a clue. Even the anti-gun lobbyists who we had talking to us the other day didn't know what this thing was. So now there's a big discussion about what to do about it.
Right. In addition to learning about what bump stocks are, I've also learned a lot about how Republican lawmakers like to spend their free time involving guns. It seems like there's always a sentence before, and I didn't know anything about bump stocks. It's House Speaker Paul Ryan several times has called himself called himself an avid sportsman.
Right.
So it's Republicans. You can tell by subtly by that idea that they're on the one hand saying, "I love guns. Please know I know a lot about guns." And in the same breath, maybe we'll consider a hearing. Maybe we'll consider something.
The big development yesterday was that the NRA came out with a statement. They finally weighed in. Bump stocks is what this shooter used in Las Vegas. Horrible. They said, well, it should be subject to regulation. And then everybody said, oh, that's a big deal. Like, they think this thing should be regulated. That's a big step for the NRA. But last night, Wayne LaPierre, the head of the NRA, went on TV and he said, well, we didn't say ban it, and we didn't say we're going to take it away from you. So, I mean, that's a little bit of a couch there.
Right, and you had the White House today. Sarah Sanders was asked about gun regulation again, and she said that the White House wants to be a part of that conversation. Jordan, what are you hearing from people about whether they actually want to see any move on regulation or on legislation relating to bump stocks?
Yeah, Arlette, we haven't seen any specifics out of the White House yet on what they might actually consider, and this topic didn't really come up in great length in today's briefing, in part because of the president kind of ripping the headlines in a different direction with his cryptic comments last night. But we do know that the White House is open to having this conversation, and a bit of interesting timing yesterday when the NRA came out with that statement. It was just a few minutes before the White House press briefing, so you have to wonder whether or not the NRA reached out to the White House and that they had communicated on this, because they were kind of on the same page in terms of, let's look at this. This is something that obviously automatic weapons are already banned in the United States, and so this is something they're open to looking at. Perhaps it's even a way to kind of pivot the conversation away from stricter gun control. This is something that everyone can agree on without getting into banning people's weapons or putting new restrictions on guns, but it can look like Republicans are taking action on this.
But so far, guys, neither the White House nor the NRA has said they're behind it, the legislation.
Right.
Ben, what's the legislation about?
Right.
So the legislation, what's interesting, and I spoke to a few gun control advocates today, on the left obviously, and they're sensing an opportunity here because for the first time they've pointed out, you're seeing Republicans, conservative Republicans, talking about the need for legislation. And they say the very fact that you have Republicans acknowledging the need for legislation, for this sort of piecemeal approach for gun control, that's a step further than, usually the response that you hear after things like the Orlando nightclub shooting or Sandy Hook, when many Republicans just push back on that idea. But basically you have several competing pieces of legislation that have been introduced that would effectively ban these bump stocks, similar types of add-ons that would effectively turn semi-automatic weapons and allow them to function more like machine guns. But Republicans are still split on this. You have some, of course, now coming out and saying you might need legislation. You have a few more. I would say most of the Republicans I've spoken to the last couple of days want to see what the ATF has to say, which is basically what the NRA said in their statement last night. But another important piece of context, speaking to a former ATF agent this morning, he told me it's very rare for the ATF to actually go back and review their rules and overturn a previous judgment. Of course, that's what Republicans are asking for. In 2010, they said bump stocks. They made a ruling that bump stocks do not change the classification of a gun to make it a machine gun. So that's why they're still allowed and they're not regulated. And it's very rare. It's the last example this person could think of was in the 1980s about a certain kind of shotgun that was invented. And that was one of the most recent times. They usually like to go by the book. They don't like to get political when they review these statutes. So this might have been a way for the NRA to kind of move the football a little bit, but there are still these calls, as you were saying, Justin, to codify this into law, and there are some Republicans, notably, who are supporting that push.
And this is something we'll be watching play out probably in the months to come up on Capitol Hill. But right now we also are very interested in what is going on with President Trump's cabinet. You have these reports that Secretary Mnuchin spent over $800,000 on military travel. You have speculation that Rex Tillerson may be leaving as Secretary of State. What do you guys think is happening?
And we know that within the hour, the president was sitting down with the Treasury Secretary, and
right.
we don't know exactly.
Well,
what that
they have standing meetings. We think. I mean, it's not like he's not necessarily calling in there to scold him. I will say that he right now doesn't have a few cabinet positions filled. He doesn't have a DHS secretary. He doesn't have an HHS secretary. That guy got fired last week. So to fire any more this week, which has been talked about, would be a big problem.
Well, and it was really interesting. In the briefing, Sarah Sanders was asked 3 times about 3 different people whether the president had confidence in them.
Tillerson.
About Tillerson, acting DHS Secretary Elaine Duke, and also asking if he still had confidence in General Kelly. So lots of interest, and we'll see what happens over there with that cabinet. Just want to do a quick round of final thoughts. Jordan, what's your final thought for the day?
Yeah, back to the birth control, we saw that the White House is coming out in support of these businesses having religious liberties, touting this as a huge victory in religious liberties. But what is less clear from the White House is what this really means from a public health perspective. Sarah Sanders was unable to answer how many women may actually lose birth control under this new proposal. That's huge. This is women who actually get these benefits that could stand to lose them. And the White House, in the name of religious liberties, is unable to answer what it means for the health of those women who count on this mandate to get their birth control.
Yeah, that's something that a lot of folks are wondering, how is this personally going to affect me? Ben, your final thoughts?
Well, next week we've reported that President Trump is making a big announcement about the Iran deal, the nuclear deal, and I'll be looking for what he says to Congress in that speech, because people up here on the Hill are not quite sure what the president's going to do, and depending on whether he asks Congress to change the agreement itself or impose other sorts of sanctions on Iran for ballistic missiles and other programs, that will go a long way into determining, the fate of that deal internationally, which is obviously one of the biggest foreign policy concerns that our country is facing right now, especially with a nuclear North Korea as well. So I'll be watching that speech.
Thanks to both Ben and Jordan. Megan, your final thoughts?
Well, I'm looking at this decision to roll back the birth control mandate today, and I'm thinking about it in the broader context of what does it mean when you have an administration that's in charge of implementing a law, a pretty nascent law, Obamacare hasn't been around for very long, and they fundamentally disagree with it. Yeah. You've got a lot of activists already calling sabotage, and we've had all these stories kind of in different silos, like today's announcement. We've seen advertising budgets cut. We've seen the enrollment period shrinking, bigger blackout periods for people trying to sign up for Obamacare, open enrollment starting November 1st. So without repealing Obamacare, how much damage can this administration do to this law? And I think that's a sleeper story we're going to see unfold in the coming months.
Yeah. Birth control was a very popular part. This whole issue was a very popular part of the law. Prediction, Congress won't pass anything on pumps. No. And thought, Mnuchin's, we can't just throw away that he spent about $100,000 a month just on government travel, $800,000, over $800,000. $43,000 on a day trip to Miami. Has anybody out there spent $43,000 on a day trip? I don't think so. Final thought.
And we'll see what other shoes drop there. My final thought is not related to politics, but for those loyal viewers of the briefing room, you might notice that there's something new about Justin over here.
You have to be very loyal.
He has some new glasses. And I think we may have a behind-the-scenes look at how this all went down. So he actually posted these photos on Facebook and asked his friends to weigh in on the process.
Feel free.
And these were the winners. It was very involved. This was a few weeks ago.
All right.
So hope everyone likes Justin's new glasses.
So vain.
Yeah, it's too late to
you
weigh
said
in
it,
now.
not me.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for joining us here in the briefing room. On behalf of myself, Megan, and Justin, thanks for watching. Remember, if you can always watch us on Facebook, abcnews.com, and also if you haven't downloaded it, download our ABC News app. You can catch the briefing room and other videos and news stories throughout the day there. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.